On July 26th, in Guayaquil, Ecuador, 28-year-old Kayla Gonzalez was in the middle of a TikTok live stream when she became the victim of an attack. The live video, which ran about 4 minutes, shows Kayla laughing and joking around with the people she was with. At one point, you can hear her say something playfully. But near the end of the video, she starts to say something. And right after that, Manuel Lazaro, the man she was with, opened fire twice, killing her instantly. Kayla's grandmother later said she could hear screaming coming from inside the house. An argument had broken out, and by the time one of Kayla's cousins went to check on things, it was already too late. Kayla was found dead sitting in a chair. This one happened in the state of Mexico. Fernando, or Fernandito as everyone called him, lived quietly in the Gidal El Pino neighborhood, in the municipality of La Paz, with his mother, Noemi Gomez. Noemi had a speech impairment that made it really hard for her to hold down a steady job, and the family relied on help from neighbors just to get by. At some point, Noemi had reached out to 3 people she knew from a previous apartment building, Lilia, Carlos, and Ana, to borrow 1,000 pesos. She had been slowly paying it back, but on July 28th, the lenders showed up at her door demanding the full amount, which she didn't have. When little Fernando heard the argument and came out to see what was going on, these people looked at the boy and decided to use him as leverage. Noemi fought desperately to keep her son from being taken, but she couldn't stop them. She kept trying to reach Fernando, but got no response. On August 3rd, Noemi went to the Attorney General's office to report her son's kidnapping. But because of her speech impairment, nobody helped her. She tried again the next day at a different office in Nesa. Same result. On her third attempt at a prosecutor's office closer to her home, she was finally heard. That same day, authorities went to check on the situation. When they entered the home and found Fernando, he was already gone. He was found stuffed inside a sack, severely beaten, and in such a state of decomposition that his own mother couldn't recognize him. The autopsy revealed injuries to his back, chest, legs, and skull. The cause of death was a blunt, force blow to the head. According to investigators, Fernandito likely died on July 30th, just 2 days after he was taken. The suspects had hidden the body for 5 days. Lilia, Carlos, and Ana were arrested on August 8th and taken straight into preventive custody. During one of the hearings, Lilia claimed the boy had somehow hit his own head while getting out of the bath. A verdict is still pending, but today there are memorials at his home and at the park where Fernandito used to play. On June 7, 2025, in the Modilia neighborhood on the west side of Bogota, Colombia, Senator and pre-candidate Miguel Uribe was in the middle of a campaign rally. He was speaking on several topics at that moment, specifically about mental health, in front of a crowd of supporters. Meanwhile, someone with long hair could be seen slowly making their way closer to him. The suspect begins moving through the front row, then pulls out a firearm, and the moment Miguel turns his back, the attacker opens fire multiple times. The crowd erupts into panic. Supporters scatter in every direction after hearing the shots. A few people rush to Miguel's side and try to cover the wounds on the side of his head. 2 bystanders are also injured in the attack. When the ambulance arrived, he was rushed to a nearby clinic, then transferred to one of Bogota's most well-known hospitals in the north of the city, arriving in critical condition with 2 wounds to the skull. He was rushed into surgery in an attempt to save his life. Back at the scene, the suspect, a 15-year-old, was chased down by a crowd of civilians and police. He was found just a short distance away, injured in the leg, and placed under arrest. Miguel Uribe ultimately passed away in early August. Gabriel Sarmiento, from Pinonal, in the state of Aragua, Venezuela. Gabriel was a TikTok content creator who started out posting programming content and religious material, but his focus shifted dramatically when he began speaking out against corruption in the country. He listened to his followers, many of whom were going through the same things, and started calling out government officials directly in his videos, demanding they address the complaints pouring in about neglect and abuse of power. It wasn't long before Gabriel zeroed in on a specific case he'd uncovered. He made several accusations against police he claimed were involved in corruption, allegedly running extortion schemes tied to the gangs Tren de Aragua and Tren del Sheno.
Hola, mi nombre es Gabriel Jesús Sarmiento Rodríguez, de cédula de identidad 27654-015. Para nadie ya es un secreto de que realmente yo tengo información.
The videos kept coming, same pattern every time. call it out publicly, tag the officials, hope someone with power would actually do something. Things escalated when he started receiving threats coming directly from La Morita prison, a detention center run by the Bolivarian police, a place he himself had reportedly been held for 15 days not long before. The reason for that detention? Multiple complaints filed by ex-partners who accused him of harassment and threats. Still, Gabriel kept pushing. He kept making videos from the streets of Maracay, kept showing up to the courts, kept trying to give his case some legal traction. Then, on the morning of Monday, June 23rd, Gabriel was doing a TikTok live stream, talking through his complaints as usual, when he heard someone trying to break into his house. Clearly scared, he started begging for help through the stream, giving out his address, hoping someone would show up in time. He started screaming. Both he and his mother, who was home with him, were in a complete panic. Then, gunfire. The men responsible appeared on camera. Gabriel screams that he's been shot, that it's all on camera, that they shot him. He can hear his mother screaming in the background. A few seconds later, 2 more shots ring out, the ones that killed him. He collapsed to the floor, and the stream cut out. When authorities finally arrived, they found Gabriel with 9 gunshot wounds on his body. The live stream spread rapidly across social media, bringing massive attention to the case. In one of his final recordings, Gabriel had named the head of Tren de Aragua, Hector Flores, known as Niño Guerrero, as one of the people behind what would happen to him. Authorities say the investigation is still ongoing. The video starts with a young guy sitting inside a bathtub filled with dirty water, holding a skull, showing it off and messing around with it, saying, The guy, who's clearly out of it from what appears to be substance use, keeps playing with the skull like it's a ball. The person recording shifts the angle a bit and reveals that around the bathtub there's a whole group of people watching this go down completely unbothered, actually egging the guy on to keep going. You can see him dunking the skull into the water and using it to splash his friends, and himself. At some point, he puts the skull on top of his head. That's when the person recording says something that's genuinely disturbing. They zoom in on the skull for a close-up, and that's where the video ends. This happened in Colombia, in the municipality of Jamundi, Valle del Cauca, on November 18, 2024. It was around 8 p.m. inside a residential building when neighbors heard a violent argument between a man and his partner. Reports say that during the fight, the father grabbed both of his daughters and tried to throw them out the window. A neighbor managed to catch the older girl in time, but the younger one wasn't so lucky. She fell from the 3rd floor and died on impact. Neighbors rushed to help her, and once the shock turned to rage, they went after Andres, the one responsible. They dragged him into the street and beat him, a full-on mob attack. His wife, Clara, tried to stop the crowd but couldn't do anything. That same night, Clara lost both her daughter and her husband Andres. Darwin Felipe Beltran was 31 years old at the time of the events. He lived in the Las Ferias neighborhood, in the Engativa district of Bogota, with his partner Paula and their 2 kids, Susan, 7, and Santi Esteban, 4. In 2017, he was diagnosed with bipolar affective disorder. According to his partner, he had psychotic episodes and was supposed to be on treatment, but never followed through with it consistently. In 2019, there were already reports of domestic violence. Despite that, he was still living with his family. On the afternoon of October 28, 2024, the kids had gone to bed. While they slept, Darwin and Paula got into a heated argument. From what we know, he was consumed by obsessive jealousy, making intense accusations against her. In an attempt to get away from him, Paula left the room, and that's when Darwin took a sharp object and killed both of his children. Residents of the building later said that after committing the crime, Beltran opened the curtains, apparently wanting people outside to see what he had done. Neighbors forced their way through the door and dragged him out, intending to take matters into their own hands, but police intervention stopped the lynching. Beltran was taken into custody. Mario Oscar Ferreira was born on June 17, 1945, in Tucumán, Argentina. From a young age, all he ever wanted was to be a cop. He was actually rejected from the academy at first for not meeting the physical requirements, but at 18, a family connection got him in anyway. Almost immediately after joining the force, the controversies started. By his own account, he got into a brawl with 15 members of the Peronist youth movement, leaving him with a scar. He also claimed to have killed a Montoneros militant named Juan Carlos Alzogaray, though neither of those things was ever officially confirmed. When the military dictatorship came around, Malevo was 31. He was pulled from active duty for 2 years after being accused of killing people without cause. In 1986, back in democracy, he was accused in connection with the death of a man named Enrique Pro de Correa, but nothing came of it. By 1987, he'd become the head of robbery and theft investigations for the Tucumán police. He was also said to have killed 2 members of a local drug crew known as Los Gardelitos. Then, in 1998, another accusation, a third member of the same gang, reportedly caught robbing a house, was brought into the station, where Malevo allegedly tortured him. The man's body was later found covered in acid with his head missing. Malevo was never arrested for it. No evidence was ever found against him. On October 10th, 1991, 3 criminals were found dead in Laguna de Robles, in the northern part of Tucumán. Malevo claimed they were Gardelitos members who were killed in a shootout. Then, in November of that same year, 9 high-ranking police officers were charged with misappropriation of public funds. Some were removed from their posts, and the very next day, one of those former officers accused Malevo of having executed the 3 men found in Laguna de Robles. A trial began on November 26, 1993. He was sentenced to life in prison. Malevo showed up to the sentencing in a suit. When it was over, he walked to the bathroom, took off the suit, and put back on his regular clothes. Then he barricaded himself inside and walked out of the courthouse holding a fragmentation grenade, threatening to take everyone in the building down with him. From that day, he became a fugitive. 79 days later, on March 3rd, 1994, he was tracked down in Zorro Muerto in Santiago del Estero. After a 10-hour standoff and an exchange of gunfire with police, he finally surrendered. He was taken to prison to serve his sentence. In September 1996, the governor of Tucumán, a friend of Malevo, reduced the sentence to 20 years. 2 years later, he was free. In 2008, a federal judge ordered his arrest again, this time for alleged crimes committed during the dictatorship at a clandestine detention center in the former arsenal Miguel de Escuenaga. When Malevo found out, he said he wasn't going to turn himself in. On November 21st, 20 officers showed up at his property, where he lived with his wife and kids. Malevo grabbed a gun and climbed up onto the roof of his house, about 30 feet off the ground. He was calm enough up there to actually agree to an interview, during which he strongly hinted he was thinking about ending it all. Eventually, police forced their way onto the property. From up on the roof, Malevo watched them coming. Right there in front of his family and the cameras, he raised the gun to his head and pulled the trigger. He was rushed to the hospital, but he was already gone. The whole country watched it happen in real time. 2 days later, Malevo Ferreira was buried. This happened in Villa Crespo, Argentina, inside an apartment, and what investigators found there was one of the most disturbing crime scenes imaginable. Blood everywhere. On the floor were the bodies of Adrian Seltzer, 53, and his 2 sons, Ian, 15, and Ivo, 12. Their bodies were scattered between the bedrooms and the living room. In the bathroom, inside a bathtub filled with blood, was the mother, Laura Leguizamon, 50, with stab wounds to her chest. The trail of blood showed she had wounded herself in the bedroom and dragged herself to the bathroom, where she eventually died. On the kitchen table, investigators found a handwritten note, and that's when they started to suspect that it was Laura herself who had killed her family before turning on herself. That theory only got stronger as the investigation unfolded. It all happened between 5 and 6 in the morning on May 21st of this year. Laura and her husband were asleep when she woke up, grabbed a sharp object, and stabbed Adrian 3 times until he was dead. He never had a chance to fight back. Laura then walked out of the bedroom covered in blood and went straight to her oldest son Ian's room. She attacked him, and he tried to run, but only made it as far as the living room, where she killed him. After that, she went to Ivo's room. He was asleep but managed to fight back for a moment. Defensive wounds were found on his forearms and hands. After being wounded, he fell from his bed to the floor, where he died. After killing her entire family, Laura walked back to the bed where her husband lay, then made her way to the bathroom, where she died. Her hands were dirty and covered in lint, which forensic experts say is consistent with self-inflicted wounds. She also had scratch marks on her head, indicating her children had fought back. Both knives were recovered, and Laura's fingerprints were found all over the apartment, ruling out any third-party involvement. As for the note on the kitchen table, Bare footprints around it matched Laura's feet. The writing was disorganized, but parts of it were legible. With what was about to happen, something very dark had taken over me. I was ruining my parents' lives. We were going to end up on the street. It was too much. I love you. And at the very end, just the word, goodbye. Inside the apartment, police also found psychiatric medications prescribed for personality disorder and psychotic episodes. Given the sheer brutality of the crime, investigators believe Laura suffered a psychotic break that led her to do what she did. José Luis López Nunchavay was a former Peruvian police officer, around 44 years old, who after leaving the force had been working as a dentist. He was under investigation for allegedly inappropriately touching a 17-year-old in his office. In August 2023, he was placed under a 9-month preventive detention order in connection with those allegations. José lived with his wife Danny and their 6-year-old twins. Then, in March 2025, the bodies of every member of the family were found dead. The 2 children were on a mattress. They appeared to have been poisoned. Danny had a gunshot wound, and José was found next to her. Police found a letter that made it clear this had been planned in advance. In it, José wrote that he felt a greater disaster was coming. The letter was left alongside a key intended for a neighbor, the same neighbor who would end up opening the door and walking into the horrifying scene. Investigators believe the trigger was the news that José was about to be sent to prison. On June 22, 2025, in Villa de Reconciliación, Managua, Nicaragua, 43-year-old Bayardo Jesus Morales Osorio lived with his wife, 46-year-old Julia Asuncion Montoya, and their daughter. From the outside, the relationship seemed fine, but in recent months, Julia had started treating Bayardo with contempt, and he felt total indifference. He suspected she was cheating. Eventually, he confirmed it. Julia was involved with a man named David Isaac, who neighbors said had been manipulating her into pushing Bayardo out of the house. At 5 in the morning on that day, they got into an argument. Julia demanded he leave and threatened to call the police. Bayardo refused. He wanted to stay with his wife and daughter. The fight escalated, and Bayardo ended up strangling Julia to death. He then went to his daughter's room, told her what had happened, and sat with her for nearly an hour. Once she fell asleep, he strangled her too. He placed both bodies together on the bed, covered them with a blanket, and set up a rope. Before doing anything else, he recorded a video confessing to both killings, blaming David for destroying his family and justifying his daughter's death by saying he didn't want to leave her alone in this world. In his final words, he asked forgiveness from both families and said they'd see each other wherever God decided. Then he stepped off the chair.
La amo, por eso me casé con ella. Amo a mi hija. Me duele lo que pasó. Como lo lamento lo que pasó. Lo único que quería es estar con mi esposa. Estar en mi hogar.
This one happened in Ciudad Juarez, Chihuahua, a crematorium that had been operating as if everything was perfectly normal, taking in bodies, returning ashes, doing what a crematorium is supposed to do. Or so it seemed, dating back to 2020. But on Thursday, June 26th, 2025, someone called 911 to report seeing what appeared to be a body inside a parked car on the corner of Avenida de Granjas and Tapachula. Municipal police were the first to respond, and when they got there, they found not one, but 2 bodies inside a funeral vehicle. When they checked the building just a few feet away, what they found inside was beyond anything they expected. Bodies, stacked on top of each other, spread out in every direction across the property. Officers immediately called in investigators. What investigators found was staggering. Bodies piled up like bags of trash, others just scattered across the floor. The building itself was in a state of complete decay. The ceiling was literally falling apart, and the floor was coated in a thick black liquid. All in all, around 383 unidentified bodies were found inside, spread across 6 rooms. Some of them had been brought there as far back as 2020. The same year, the crematorium was supposedly still operating normally. The owner of the facility and 1 employee were taken into custody. Authorities identified the location as Crematorio Plenitude, which had been handling incineration services for at least 6 other funeral homes in Ciudad Juarez.